Well, welcome back to the afternoon session today. I want to just kind of take this moment to thank you all. I've kind of like listening into some of these sessions. I know how many great ideas that are out there and how passionate you guys are. And so we were very encouraged to hear your stories and your thoughts about these different issues. At this moment, what we're going to do is invite the breakout sessions, a representative from each session to come up to the front and share what their session was about, their ideas. And our question is, if you were to advise this administration and this president about the issue that you were talking about, what would you say? And we invite you to come up here for about 4 minutes each, 4 to 5 minutes, and try to kind of put together a briefing memo of what we've established in each of these sessions. Before I do that, I've asked our White House Initiative on AAPI staff to come up here, as well as our commissioner to be up here to just basically listen and also to sort of give you our thoughts on how our feedback to your ideas. And so I wanted to ask them to introduce themselves, starting with Akil.
Hi everybody, I'm Akil Bora. I work at the initiative with all these folks. I focus on civil rights issues, education, and I work with our 20 commissioners who are appointed by the president.
Hi everyone, can you hear me? No? Okay.
I don't think these are on, are they? Push. It's green, yeah.
Hello. My name is Mia Saika-Chen. I'm a senior advisor in the White House Initiative, and I focus on community engagement and economic growth for our initiative. So I coordinate all of our national community engagement events across the country. I encourage all of you to join our listserv in case Eddie hasn't. Eddie, I'm sure you mentioned it, right?
Not yet, no.
Oh my gosh, that's
I was getting to it.
Okay, good. And follow us on Facebook. We're at facebook.com /WhiteHouseAAPI. If you want to join our listserv, you can write to whitehouseaapi@ed.gov. But we'll probably add all of you to it after this event. So thanks so much for being here, everyone.
Hi, my name is Sunari Marshall, and I work with the initiative on sustainable neighborhoods, so a kind of combination of housing, community development, and other issues that have to do with sustainability. And also I work with our federal agency partners on trying to get them to focus more on API issues in the API community.
Do I have to push it?
Hi, I'm Audrey Beering, and I'm a senior advisor on intergovernmental affairs. So I liaise with all the 25 different agencies that we work with, trying to get them to put forth some agency plans that really create some change in our communities.
Hi, I'm Twit Duong. I'm an advisor, and I work on civil rights and immigration, and also our commission.
Hey everybody, my name is Hector Vargas, and I am a commissioner on the President's Advisory Commission for AAPIs, and in my day job, I am the executive director of the Gay and Lesbian Medical Association, which works on health policy for LGBT people.
Hi everyone again, my name is Ramey Coe. I'm also one of the commissioners from Austin, Texas, and in my day job, I'm an associate municipal judge in Austin. I'm also a lecturer in Asian American Studies at UT.
All right. So at this time, we want to turn it to you, and the way I'll open it up to any volunteers that may be brave and bold enough to start the session. If not, then I'll just start going down the list.
The immigration people, like all three of you, can come up since we didn't pick one. You can split the 4 minutes.
All right.
Does this work? In other words, Tuet's volunteered you for yourself.
You guys can come up here to the stage.
I think this session was kind of, framed towards giving advice to our advisors, but I think our presentation is going to basically, going to be based on our discussion in our session, which was basically on our individual or on our student level. So I think later on one of our peers can connect it back to you, but that's what I'm going to present. So within our group, there were various things that came up, and I'm going to try to cut it short. And there were so many different stories that we shared, and I think one of our panelists earlier had mentioned the importance of, each and every one of our stories. And one effective way that came up was documenting our stories and sharing it within our communities. One of my peers was planning on showing a documentary within his organization on campus. ARC breakout session was talking about immigration and communities. So we basically talked about ways for us to deliver the message that we learned today in the AAPI briefing back to our communities as student leaders. So I think that's when we come out in the scene. And so documenting, our panelists told us that the Library of Congress is collecting documentations of Asian American stories, and as we said, I thought that was a very powerful and effective way of delivering our message. And another thing that we can do easily is word of mouth. Things like this opportunity is really rare, and it's a great opportunity for us to be here. So kind of letting the community know that there are opportunities like this, that AAPI initiatives like that are putting this effort to spread out the message back to our community is very important for us. And yeah, I think I can pass along to my other peer.
Hi, my name is Kiwi. I'm from Rutgers University, representing the Asian American Cultural Center. Thank you, Duet, for just volunteering us first. I appreciate it. So, I guess we had 3 different groups in our breakout session. Our group really tried to dig in as to defining the biggest problem with immigration, I guess on a local level. And we came up with certain solutions as to how we can go about trying to remedying some of these very bigger issues that come along with immigration. And I guess just we talked a lot about on-campus solutions for immigration, and we talked about having support groups for people who are struggling with similar issues. We thought that through support groups, people can really, educate each other on the different problems that they face when it comes to immigrational issues. Also, help each other out through connections each other might have. And we just pretty much defined that the biggest problem with immigration is a lack of education for the AAPI, sorry. The AAPI groups. Yeah, AAPI, thank you, Eddie. And so we felt that education of the different problems with immigration could be a very simple solution, such as like expired visas, can't read my handwriting, application processes, renewals. So yeah, we just felt like education was the main focus for really remedying a lot of the problems for immigrational issues. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Just to let you know, Sarang and Kiwi are Korean, and I'm also Korean too, so Korean pride. Kind of awkward, but that's how I start. Try to. Any Koreans?
Are we still live?
There we go. I see you.
It's about the community, not
It's about the community. That's right. As I mentioned earlier, it's very hard to approach or identify or outreach AAPI undocumented students because there's some sort of cultural stigma or social discrimination within our community. And as Sarang mentioned about having some sort of like collecting stories and have some sort of documentation or movies to bring ideas and outreach communities, and how Q mentioned about how educate our community to understand broader context of immigration issues at large. And I think we need some sort of like compile all the information together and kind of have a toolkit guide, maybe at the AAPI website, and get some sort of information so that any community members could download with the resources guide to outreach AAPI undocumented youth to provide resources how to go to college and pursue higher education and move on to college, and even provide like free legal assistance, because there's a lot of immigrant communities are looking for that free legal assistance. So I think we thought that it would be a great idea to have some sort of like toolkit guide or like a resources guide in the website so anyone could download and share the information.
Great. A round of applause. Okay, well, actually, before we bring up our next one, I want to just turn it over to our initiative staff. I'm not sure if they have any thoughts or questions for that, but our initiative, we take immigration very seriously. It's one of our forefront of our huge priority for us, and so it's really encouraging to hear your stories, your feedback, and with that, I'm going to turn it over to our folks over here at the table.
I feel like a proud parent. But I think we had a great discussion. I feel reinvigorated about my work. I think there were a lot of ideas, even beyond what was shared by our three great representatives too. But I think they came up with some great ideas at the ground level. They offered some ideas to the initiative on how we can bridge some gaps between the student bodies and educate educators and administrators and provide tools to the community too. And so I'm really excited to take this back, work with our team to see what else we can do to advance the community and what the federal and see what the federal government can do to better improve getting information out there to the community. So thank you so much for the discussion, the questions, challenging me, and I look forward to talking and working with you all in the future.
Great. Thank you. I think our next group is so ambitious they came up here so early. So we will invite, I think you're from the Youth Empowerments or Empowering API Students. So.
Hello, my name is Sayata Shayan. I'm also an intern at the initiative. And before I give the action agenda, I wanted to thank the initiative staff members for providing this space and this opportunity. And thank you, students, college, high school, and administrators who are here, and hope that you take this opportunity and embrace it and can take this back to your campus and your community, whether that's at home or local, state, and such. And so I was with the Empowering AAPI Students through Campus Activism, and in our discussion in our room, it was very diverse. We had college students, a few high school students, and administrators as well. We discussed about how to build student capacity and partnerships with the White House and the initiative. And some of the few pointers were outreach, in particularly being virtually connected. I believe Kieran and Christina had spoken earlier about how in our generation we have Twitter and Facebook, and so utilizing that social media and also having some form of virtual mentors to pair up as advisors, either from the federal government, having federal representatives on campuses if possible. Another would be having White House sponsored teach-ins for either specific issues or trainings. And the trainings could be on having campus liaisons or teach-ins that these students could utilize in order to build capacity in their campus or have student activism. And another is sending out data, whether it's reports or surveys, for students and organizations to use to support in their activism. And also using these students, polling the students for insights, and for an example, a student capacity survey, so that the initiative can get an insight on what issues these students are facing on their campuses and what they think that you could do, just as a yearly update, because sometimes issues might change. And finally, another thing that was spoken about is AAPI Heritage Month and how to expand on that, having more AAPI representatives on the campuses actually go to the campuses. So the initiative is hoping from yourself, the student leaders, for invitations to speak on your campuses on more of these issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you guys have any feedback for that? Any thoughts? Just want to open it up to, looks like yourself. Great.
Well, I was in that session, and I just got to say, that was just a fraction of the awesome ideas that we got out there. There was a lot of great and dynamic things, both involving the commission and not. So again, thank you all to all the students who are in our session, and hopefully we can continue to work on some of these great ideas that we have. I think we especially like the idea of having maybe the opportunity to touch base with students through surveys or other ways periodically that don't always necessarily require a big event like this. So I think that's a really great idea. But yeah, it was a great session. Thanks for everyone who was in that one.
Wonderful. I believe next we have the LGBT and AAPI Pride session. So.
afternoon. I'm Joya Ahmed. I'm a freshman at Columbia University. And first of all, I'd like to thank everyone for having us all here and giving us a chance to talk about these issues. The main issue that was brought up in the LGBTQ AAPI group was that we use too many alphabets. The second big issue was that we don't like to talk about what these alphabets stand for. And the fact that there's a lot of Asian shame was a term that came up a lot, that children and parents often don't know how to communicate with each other. There's a generational gap that has yet to be bridged, and there's a lot of fear behind coming out or asking for help or searching for resources because the people don't know where to start. So a lot of our issues kind of focused on the idea of invisibility of the Asian people in the LGBT community, the idea of giving out data and information and finding equal ways to access this information, whether that's through language, transcending the language barrier by having translators, by having campus involvement, by having peer-to-peer mentors, and also having the idea of dispelling myths about LGBT people and success. One of the main things that was brought up was how Asian parents get worried when their kids come out to them. They say, my kid can never be successful now that they're gay. So you gotta choose. You can either be gay or you can be Asian. You can't be both. So we want to leave that behind and come up with a way that Asian people, kids, parents, elders can come together, bridge those generational and cultural gaps, and start to talk about these issues in a cohesive manner. So our big idea was maybe a Pan-Asian alliance to bring together the Korean LGBT community, the Bangladeshi LGBT community, the Filipino LGBT community, instead of leaving them as fragmented pieces, bringing them together to make a cohesive whole, and maybe that way we could start to get real change in the Asian community and give ourselves a voice. Thank you.
Turn it over to our panelists here to give feedback.
Yeah, I also want to thank the students who were, and especially the allies who were in our session. It was a lively session and great discussion. And one of the things that the initiative and also the White House Office of Public Engagement has focused on is the intersection of LGBT and API communities and individuals, and how we can ensure that government programming addresses these issues from those multiple perspectives. And that's something that we've worked on in terms of bullying, in terms of HIV prevention programs, in many different ways. And I look forward to continuing that. And also want to give a shout out to an organization that does try to, that really works to build on those intersections, and that's the National Queer API Alliance, which is holding its national conference here in DC in July. And if you need more information about that, come see me.
Sorry.
Sorry, go ahead.
Follow George Takei on Twitter and Facebook. He does post really great stuff about API LGBTQ issues.
You know, we actually talked about George Takei in our session. Is this on? Maybe I'll just talk loud. Because, you know, there was this idea of the generational gap and there not being enough role models in that generation for younger people to look up to. So what I just want to say is it sounds like we have our work cut out for us, and I'm excited about it. I love that, you know, a lot of times we go to these meetings and we hear ideas, but, you know, a year later we think, what happened to those ideas? And so, you know, I know our session talked about forming a group, staying in touch over the next year, and then coming together and talking about what progress is made at the end of the year. So very excited, and I think that's probably what's happening in these other sessions. So thank you all so much for coming together with these great ideas, and can't wait to hear back, you know, in the November timeframe.
Great, thank you. Our next session will be from the Youth and Entrepreneurship session. So if there's a representative from that office or that session. Yeah.
Hi, everyone. My name is Shilpa Chandran, and I'm a freshman at Georgetown University this year. So today in our breakout session, we were talking about, you know, supporting entrepreneurs and small businesses in the AAPI community. And sort of a theme that we developed throughout our entire breakout session was how supporting these, you know, businesses really helps to make your community, your state, and your company stronger as a whole, rather than just focusing on the individual, just expanding it to the community as a whole. And we first kind of talked about getting the information out there. I'm sure this came up in a lot of breakout sessions, how there's so many resources for our communities, but we just don't know about them. Like, people don't know where to go. So we're talking about, you know,
doing summits in different states, word of mouth, constantly expanding, having one-on-one conversations to really kind of open up this forum and to make it more accessible to people that, unlike us, don't have the opportunity to come to events like these. And then we also talked about how can we make entrepreneurship, accessible for the broader public good, and what is government's role in sort of assisting that broader public good. And we talked how entrepreneurship for minorities really makes it easier for minorities to live in these communities and to establish themselves and to form relationships and to really make their home, because it allows them to have a stake in where they are. We talked about decreasing the stigma of taking out loans from other people, because oftentimes, AAPI families often have a stigma against, borrowing money from others. Now we need to decrease that to, make startups more, encourage more startups, really. We talked about having counseling services, allowing people to talk one-on-one with other more experienced mentors and how to develop their ideas. Giving businesses the opportunity to grow by themselves rather than keeping tabs on them, to really encourage a sense of independence. Talking about sustainability, talked about, investing in new and burgeoning industries, really just setting up presences in big communities to make a viable impact on entrepreneurship as a whole, and to really make our voices heard, in the business sector. Thank you.
Thank you. Mia, do you have any thoughts?
Thanks, Shilpa, and thank you to everyone who was involved in our workshop. I wish we had more time to talk, because I find those recommendations so helpful and important. So when we follow up with you all, I'm volunteering all of us to give you all our contact information so you can follow up with us directly about any other kind of questions or recommendations or comments that you might have. Thank you so much.
Great. And on that note, as a follow-up to this briefing, we'll be sending all of you emails with resources as well as emails of all of the folks that were up here today, just so that you keep in touch with them and follow up with any questions or thoughts that you might have. So with that, we come to our last breakout session, and that is the Maximizing Educational Opportunities. And so with that, I'll invite our representative up.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jennifer Briones. I'm a senior at Loyola University, Maryland. And I just wanted to first thank the White House and the AAPI initiative for having all of us here today. As Eddie said, I was in the education breakout session. We first, part one, focused on big group discussion, which was basically continuing the panel discussion that we had earlier this morning. And in that discussion, we talked about the big issues that came up this morning, such as the tuition hikes and people's concerns about quality of education and defining that and what that means. And basically, we were given advice that the best way to get our voices out there was to reach out to your local administrators, school administrators, and state government as well, and that eventually maybe it'll go to a federal level as well. Afterwards, in our second portion, we separated into smaller groups in which we discussed more issues and then came back together and picked the most important ones, in our opinion. The first one was sometimes there is a misunderstanding between professors and AAPI students. This could entail sometimes professors have issues with students who have English as their second language, or some AAPI students tend to be more shy and therefore do not get that participation grade. That is a huge aspect of many college grades. And the solution to this would be encouraging cultural competency in public universities by the federal government, and that would come through such things as cultural competency training, which could be funded by grants. The second issue we discussed was transparency. So a lot of people want to know, where exactly are my tuition dollars going? Now, the federal government is becoming more and more transparent, so we focus more on state government. We want to encourage them, as our main concern, to be more available, to be more transparent. You know, why should we have to fill out FOIA forms and wait forever to figure out where our money is going? We had a great idea from one of our students that perhaps there should be a website for all universities that can be accessed, in which there could be a list of all of the grants and scholarships that are available by all of the schools. And that way there would be somewhere where we could all see at which schools we could get which scholarships. A third issue we discussed is after-school program availability. And we talked about what we can do instead of asking for funds. And what we can do instead of that is leverage our resources, such as promoting community advocacy, promoting these programs, partnering with nonprofit organizations, and getting the word out there, saying these programs are out there, they're available, so take advantage of them. And finally, we talked. Someone brought up maybe we should have a program for students who are being interested in becoming teachers, where we could train them and have them teach and mentor younger AAPI students or ESL students. And apparently there is already a program that exists. So that just brought up the issue again of promotion and getting the word out there and having our voice heard. Thank you.
Well, thanks for saving the best for last. I mean, I was, that's my bias. No, but I was very, very much impressed, and I think all of us here are in terms of the ideas, the passion, and just the insight that all of you have, and especially for our group talking about education issues. There are a lot of things that I think sometimes when we're in DC, we become disconnected with what's happening on the ground, and our office tends to be pretty sharp on these things, but again, I learned a lot from all of you, and I thought a lot of you had a lot of smart ideas. Folks said that we're not gonna ask for more money because we know we're not gonna get any more money, so let's talk about leveraging our resources. Let's talk about leveraging our programs. And when I informed them that this program already exists, they said, why don't we know about it? And that's our responsibility, to make sure that we're getting these programs and resources out to you much better. So I wanted to thank all of you for that insight and that feedback. Question?
Well,
what's the program called? TRIO. Yeah. There's actually a lot of programs through the Department of Education that provides funding for ELLs on different levels. So sometimes it's given to the state. It's always given to the state, but it's tied into some other programs. So there's TRIO, there's Race to the Top. There's actually, there's probably 8 to 10 different programs that provide funding.
Well, thanks to the initiative staff for coming up here, and for all of you for presenting your ideas. I know that there's a lot of things that were talked about all day, and a lot of opportunities for you to engage, and this brings us to the last opportunity for you to do that. And so what we want to do is, for the next 15 minutes or so, we want to open up the floor to you in a town hall session. Right, so this is our chance to really engage the initiative staff. These are the folks that are the eyes and the ears of the API community, and we want to just hear from you. What are your thoughts? If there are any things that were not said for this portion or for any of the portions here today, we just want to open it up broadly for all of you to speak. And I also want to encourage you to come speak on the microphones, just so that the folks that are watching on the live stream can hear you. So you can start making your way over to the microphones. Right, go ahead.
Hi. A lot of these problems that have been brought up and have to be addressed, it seems like there are already programs that are in place, and it's, at least in our discussion with empowering the community, a lot of the solutions that we tried to think of, they're already there. It's just that nobody knows about it. So it's this idea of promotion that's a problem. Would it be difficult to kind of mandate that school multicultural centers have to distribute this information, that they would have it? Because I know mine doesn't, and if you would have to go on your own to look through it, and they're pretty much just as in the dark as I am and the students. So how would you address that?
It's a good question. Is anyone brave enough to answer that?
Well, let me throw this out there first. So I've mentioned this to a couple of the breakout sessions. I don't, but I want to make sure everybody here knows, right? Our website, www.aapi.gov. And if you go to that website, we have a lot of downloadable documents on there that not only can address some of these issues y'all have, but you can start immediately disseminating this information. For example, we developed, well, actually not, I don't want to take too much credit for this, commissioners. It's really the staff who did this work. A comprehensive federal agency resource guide specifically for the API community that goes through all the federal agencies, how to access them, what services they provide, you know, et cetera. So that's already available out there. And we also have some other documents that sort of overview a lot of the programs that we've been doing. So at least in terms of like those resources that we can provide, that can provide information on what's already out there that maybe people haven't heard of, we need your help to get that out there and disseminate it. And follow us, you know, join the mailing list, api.gov, et cetera. And then when you guys get, you know, our notifications from us, we need you to echo that, right? It needs to be like a constant web, like it goes to you and that goes to your networks and hubs, and then other hubs send out to more and more, right? Like you know, you've seen the diagram flow charts, right? We want it to look like these sunbursts that go out to all these different communities. So that's one thing that we can do. I'm going to stop there and not leave someone else to discuss the issue of mandating.
I want to ask the question back is, you know, obviously a lot of here are trying to absorb your question, but I want to ask you, who are the usual multicultural offices accountable to, right? They're accountable usually to their funders, their constituents, some of the administrators in schools, and so maybe you can find out where the accountability points are, and if it comes back to the federal government and there's some federal funding tied, then obviously there's a link for us to have a lever here to push that accountability lever. And so we're definitely interested in pushing those accountability levers.
Great. Mia, do you want to talk about the resource guide real quick?
Yeah. So Ramey mentioned that we have this API federal resource guide that has, you know, most of you should have gotten it, but I think we have more copies in the lobby. But it basically describes a lot of different programs and gives a snapshot of grants and resources available from 17 different federal agencies. And it gives examples of community organizations or individuals who have successfully leveraged these grants, who have received federal funding or different resources in that way, and so they kind of give people advice on how to access those resources. But I also wanted to mention, and we can send this to you all too if you just let us know that you want it. If you want to have a roundtable or a forum or some kind of event in your local community, and if you want us to bring speakers from the Department of Education or the Department of Health and Human Services or different agencies there to explain what their resources are and explain, you know, how to access them, then we would be more than happy to do that. We've held events across the country. This year we have a very ambitious community engagement schedule, and we're focusing on the Midwest and the South. But we're really, really open to kind of bringing the federal resources out to the community. So if you're willing to host an event or a roundtable, organize your other students or other members of your community to come together, we would be glad to bring those speakers out to you.
Great, thanks. We'll go to our next question.
Hi, my name is Sophia Cho. I'm from Rutgers University. I don't know, and I know the panelist is more for like specific questions relating to your fields. This might be just more for Kieran and Chris, who I don't think are here right now, but I wanted to ask about this before, and someone briefly brought up the issue with bullying in the Army and the soldiers. The recent light of like Danny Chen, who was a Chinese American from New York, who recently committed suicide on base in Afghanistan. And we touched upon a lot with bullying within schools and colleges within the United States, but I was wondering if the API Community Initiative has anything that helps Asian American soldiers and people who are considering going into ROTC, and especially because I have a lot of friends at Rutgers who are part of this ROTC program. So if there's anything that will be happening, or if there's already things that are already happening with that.
Actually, we have been engaged on the private Danny Chen issue. We've been in conversations with Liz Yang, who's been an amazing leader, right? And we helped help her meet with the Secretary of Army's folks. So we're glad that she's able to. We were glad we were able to facilitate that dialogue, because we do want to facilitate leaders' access to federal agency leaders. And I think what we have is coming up is a roundtable with Department of Veterans Affairs, which are those who are coming out of active duty, and with the Veteran Affairs leadership with the veterans communities on the supports they can provide. But we are in touch with the Department of Defense and their kind of diversity inclusion shop. And so if you think that's a good idea to have a roundtable, I'd be interested in talking to you more about that, and in terms of understanding what supports there are for those in active duty who are API. So thank you for your idea.
Sure. And on that note, I think it'd be appropriate for Akil, if you want to talk about our efforts on the bullying front as well.
Sure. So the initiative is working on harassment and bullying issues for the AAPI community, and in terms of getting the information about how to file a federal claim when these issues come up, dealing with the issues of making sure that parents are understanding what students are going through, making sure that students are communicating those issues to their teachers and parents. And we put on a bullying prevention summit in New York, where we actually bussed in students from Philadelphia, from New Jersey, and New York as well. So we're going to continue with our outreach. There's also a federal interagency team that we sit on that focuses on harassment, and Department of Defense is part of that as well. So we make sure our voice is to go back and say, we know HHS or DOD, you're doing a great job on this issue. What's the AAPI component to that? Are you making sure that materials are translated? Are you making sure you're reaching out to specific communities? Are you taking into consideration the unique needs of our community? So that's continuously what we're doing on a day-to-day basis when we're interacting with the federal government folks.
Great. Just as a show of hands, who here knows someone or has been bullied themselves over the last year or so? Right. So, I mean, we mentioned this earlier in our conversation that AAPI communities are affected just as much, if not more, on bullying than any other community. And so it's a huge priority for us, and we need to make sure that we're not only talking about this issue here in the Beltway, but we're hearing from all of you on your campuses. Mia mentioned having roundtables and conference calls. Yeah, I think that's a very effective way for us to hear from you guys on, what are the appropriate ways for us to address this issue? How can we better serve you at this administration level? And what are the ways that we can solve this moving forward? So we want to keep this conversation going, and I want to thank you so much for your question. Who do we have next? Up there. Yeah.
Hi there. This is more of a question that relates to the first panel that we were discussing and talking about the AAPI population as a community. And in the first panel, we spoke about how a lot of our communities view themselves as micro-communities. For example, the Indian population doesn't necessarily place itself in the larger Asian community. What I wanted to know, especially in terms of students being active on campus, is how we can show that we can have an amalgamation of communities without necessarily having assimilation into a larger population. So how can you retain the idea of being an Indian, being Chinese, being Filipino, being Hawaiian, and still be a part of the larger community, and how that can foster a sense of community so we can move forward with a lot of these initiatives?
Sure.
I work a lot on coalition building. In student activism and organizing. And I think, let's take this question even bigger, right? Like, there's also the issue of how do we work in coalition with other communities of color, with other marginalized communities, with women's groups, with LGBTQ communities, with people with disabilities and mental health, and all of these kinds of things, right? It's not just about coalitions within the API community, it's about broader coalitions in order to get things achieved that maybe we can't do on our own, or because it affects more than just our community. But at the same time, I don't think it's necessary for us to necessarily sacrifice some of our individual heritage as well. I think there's examples in certain campuses, you can look at some best practices, and the culture and history of different campuses and areas means that this develops differently, but some campuses have been very successful at having umbrella organizations like an Asian American Student Union or Student Association that does a lot of coordination between groups while each individual group still has its own independence, its own programming, its own work. At the University of Texas, in response to this concern about balkanization between the different API groups, they founded a couple years ago the Asian American Leadership Council. And so now, once every 2 weeks or something like that, the president of every API student organization on campus, the presidents all meet in order to discuss their issues and things like that. So I think it's perfectly capable of doing that. I actually think with college students and young people, it's easier to make the API sell, right? Like, let me just ask this question out here. How many of you here would say you primarily identify as Asian American? Okay, I'm gonna raise my hand myself on that, okay. How many people's parents primarily identify as Asian American? Right, a lot fewer, right? But it only takes, as we can see probably from most of the people in this room, one generation here in the United States to recognize that larger Pan-Asian identity. And I've even seen it in my parents, right? My parents have been here now for almost over 30 years. And before, I never really saw them or heard them talk about Asian Americans or Asian experiences, or as Asians, we need to work together on this or that. And surprisingly, starting a few years ago, I started hearing it more and more from them. And I think part of it is because when you're here in the United States, you recognize that regardless of where our family is really from or things like that, we're gonna be treated certain ways based on perceptions. We're gonna deal with stereotypes and discrimination based just on how people lump us together or choose to lump us together, right? And so that forces us in many ways to be coalition. But at the same time, there's a lot of great strengths that I draw from different groups, right? I love seeing, for example, the passion of the Korean American community for their identity and their strength, right? Their unity on campus, right? I really like the grassroots activism I see a lot in the Vietnamese American community, for example. I love the fact that the South Asian community is really good at fundraising, for example, right? And these are different pieces that we all have strengths at. And different communities haven't necessarily learned how to do it on their own, and if we can work together to bring those strengths to each other, right? I mean, I know it sounds kind of crude, but it's true, right? We don't all do the same things and have the same strengths because we all have different histories. So if we can build those and bring those strengths to each other and share those abilities, then we have a lot better deal, especially when we start to recognize that our fates are interlinked, right? The Japanese Americans recognized that with 9/11, that they needed to reach out to South Asians and Middle Eastern, Muslim, and Arab Americans, right? They needed to be solidary with that. One of the first examples we know is Vincent Chin, back in the early 80s, right, 1982. Everyone should see a documentary called Vincent Who and Who Killed Vincent Chin, those two movies, because they really focus on how the API identity developed out of national tragedies that brought people together in certain ways. I think that's a perfect case study if you want to see how different groups like Chinese, Indians, Japanese Americans, Pacific Islanders, et cetera, saw this one guy who got killed because he was Chinese American, but mistaken for Japanese American, right? It really showed people that we're all part of one community at the end of the day. And so I think that's really important, that we do build that coalition. But it doesn't, I think, entail sacrifice of our individual identities.
Thank you. We have about 10 minutes left, so we're going to go rapid fire, and I'm going to ask the panelists to keep their answers short for this part. So, over here.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Andrew Ye. I'm from the University of Colorado, Denver. And we talk a lot about community, but we kind of haven't addressed any local nonprofits that target programs that have ESL programs or target leadership programs towards high schoolers or middle schoolers. What can the AAPI initiative do for those?
No, I was just going to say that that's the focus of most of our work. And so that's who we rely on. We really rely on local community leaders and local community orgs as the experts, and they really guide and dictate a lot of the work that we do here. And the guide that we put together is really focused on them and getting them resources, because we know that they're really helping our community. So we're really targeting and reaching out to them.
Yeah, just as an example of what Mia is saying, for this harassment and bullying conference that we put on in New York, we really partnered with organizations on the ground in Philadelphia, New York, and New Jersey to reach out to their communities, to find out their stories, and really bringing folks who, we actually had interpreters who were there at the event to make sure that they took advantage of resources that were desperately needed. So that's just one example of the community engagement efforts that we're doing.
Hi there, Richard from Columbia once again. You guys talked a lot today about getting involved, AAPI is getting involved with public service, kind of following our passions, getting engaged. So I guess one of the first, easiest ways to get engaged, kind of the first door into public service is working on campaigns. So what roles do you see in terms of Asian American voter outreach kind of what roles do you think AAPIs can play on campaigns? What specific skills do we have, such as fundraising, that could make us give us comparative advantage and make us an asset to a campaign?
Well, I guess we have to be somewhat careful on how we talk about this because, we are an executive branch agency. We're not doing politics here. But I can talk a little bit about politics, I think, generally. I work in campaigns a lot of my life. I think it's a very great way to get involved. One way out there is I think was it 75% of Asian American Pacific Islanders are online every day. So that means that when it comes to things like social networking and outreach and doing that type of organizing, APIs are particularly well positioned with some competitive advantages. But again, sometimes it really is not necessarily about our community, right? Like all of us have strengths as individuals, and being out there in whatever thing that we have to offer helps APIs in general, right? Because since there are so few of us, if you are out there being involved in campaigns or civic engagement, there's also ways to be involved on issues, not individual candidates and things like that. If you're not comfortable with that, then it reminds people, right? They're Asian American Pacific Islanders, and they're citizens, and they're part of our communities, and they care about the same things that we care about. They care about our government, they care about our future, and they're working with us. So whatever you do, whatever you offer, you're already making a difference simply by showing up, simply by being there.
Yeah, just to add on to that, and to kind of speak very carefully about this, I've never been someone interested in government or politics throughout my life. I was always a science and math geek at school. I was captain of my chess team. I was part of our math and science class. I started it in my school. That's how geeky I was. We didn't have it. I brought it in. And so my parents are both professors in computer science and pharmacy. I never really got involved, and I never felt like I needed to, like I was saying earlier today. I kept my head down, and I got my good grades, went to the college that I wanted to. But there was a moment, again, in college when I realized that that's not enough. That we as a community, as young people, have to really stand up and make our voices known. And this is what this whole briefing and this summit is all about, is that you all are chosen and you've been brought here because people will listen to you when you go back to your campuses. You are a leader on your campus. And so when you go back, we're asking you to be a partner to this White House and to speak with the authority of having come here and being a partner here. The moment where I, decided that I wanted to speak out was when I dropped out of college, joined the Barack Obama campaign, went to New Hampshire as an intern, knocking on doors and making phone calls for about 4 months with no pay, nothing. I slept on couches. I got hives all over my body after not sleeping for weeks. What else? I'm sorry. That just brings
really
back.
Selling it there.
I think that's enough. Thank you, Eddie.
You're just bringing
Next
back
question.
some bad memories here. Bringing back some bad memories. My parents told me that wasn't the way to go. But the reality is, look how far we've come, and look how far this administration has come. And I think that for all of us, young Asian Americans, we have to buck the trends, go against convention, and do what's risky, do what's unorthodox, because it's only when we decide to take those risks that we can really make an impact in the world. So that's my encouragement to you all. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Claire Sa, and I'm from the University of Richmond. And I just wanted to touch base with something we had kind of addressed earlier in terms of the whole thing with how we identify on our college applications. I'm currently in college, but I'm going through the process again, and I can testify for myself that I understand that there's a lot of mystique behind college admissions, but what the AAPI community at large has probably come to realize is that it's detrimental to your application to identify as Asian American. And I was wondering, how is AAPI going to address that in terms of affirmative action or dispelling doubts and things like that?
Hey, I have a question for you on that issue. So I saw the article that talked about that, but it didn't provide any data. It just said that people think or perceive that it's a disadvantage to identify as API. Do you know if there's actual data out there that shows that it actually disadvantages you?
Well, I mean, that's exactly what I'm trying to say. That I don't know personally, but from all the folklore and everything that's happened with college admissions, it's been going on forever. People don't really know what the truth is, and I feel like it's either the responsibility to dispel those beliefs or to address them and make it so that it's something that we don't need to feel that we can identify with our culture.
I think that what you just proposed is perfect, and I think that's something we should take into mind and talk to the Department of Ed and say, hey, let's do some research into this issue. Let's find out the truth and what we can do.
Okay, thank you.
Great. So we're going to take these 4 questions and then wrap up here. So go ahead.
Hi everyone, my name is Happy from San Francisco. First of all, I just want to tell you guys that I just feel really inspired that I'm here today and I can learn about what your office is doing and also know what other leaders throughout the country are doing. And then my question is that like after this event, so then how can we keep you guys accountable, making sure that you are taking out advice? For example, are you gonna like, oh, all right.
She got my card too.
Next question.
Yeah. So, like, for example, are you gonna like invite people to sit on a commission, or maybe like have a like yearly report back to every one of us, or just how specifically? Or like if we think no, your office or some speaker are not doing enough on certain issue, like maybe undocumented use. So how can we make sure that we can follow and tell you again?
So to Ramy Hall.
Well, actually, we're going to talk about that at the end of this briefing. There's some action items that we'll talk about how to take all the information you took in today and transport that back to all the states that you came from. So we'll talk more about that later.
But you should email us and tell us when you think that we didn't follow through. That's why we handed you our business card. So we appreciate that.
And we did a 2-year progress report for the first 2 years, and I anticipate we'll do more of those progress reports as well. So keep an eye out on what we're doing.
Right, and get on our mailing list, and we have weekly standard, not weekly, sorry. We have regular community outreach calls, web-based options, you can post on our Facebook wall, all these sorts of things that say, hey, by the way, we talked about this, and what's the progress on that? There's lots of ways to interact with the initiative.
On that note, I did want to mention that we will be, this is just between us for right now, this small little room. We will be, and the live stream. Nobody out there tell anyone. No, we will soon be announcing this, but we're going to be starting a series of weekly web chats. So we hope that you join us on these. We'll send out an announcement soon that lets you know the topic for each week. So we hope that's an easy, quick way that you can join us. Shoot us your questions, give us your email addresses, and we can be in touch directly that way.
Great. So with these last 3 questions, we'll just have you ask the questions, and then we'll answer it all together. So why don't we start right here?
Okay, I'll just keep it really short, but basically it's just something that I saw that we didn't really address today, or maybe you guys did in a smaller focus group, but obviously I was not in it. Basically, I was wondering how feminism plays into the AAPI realm, and what you guys can do, what resources can you provide, and I want to make sure to differentiate not as the typical American feminism, but as feminism as an Asian American. Regardless of gender and sexuality, and then also the stereotypes that come with gender and sexuality, such as the China doll thing, or the dragon lady thing, or sorry, I have a lot to say. So.
Sure, thank you.
Hi, this is a question that kept lingering in my mind before this conference and still until now. I guess I think it wasn't sufficiently answered. My question is more opportunities for non-US citizen students in the US government, or even with AAPI. Just to go back to the federal resource guide that you mentioned, I looked into it and it doesn't have Department of State or Department of Defense on the list. And also AAPI on the website, it states that AAPI internships are also requiring the US citizenship. So it was kind of a disheartening factor for me, who's very much interested in getting involved with the U.S. government or the Foreign Service, and for people who came to the States to pursue a career in that area. So if you have any advice on that, I would appreciate it.
Thank you.
Hi, thanks for having us here. My name is Keenan. I'm currently attending Seattle University, but I'm from Hawaii. My question would be, is there a way to bridge the gap between for people who identify with more than one ethnic background? I'm Filipino, Japanese, and Portuguese. So for me, I am in AAPI, but I identify with more than one. So is there a way, especially in Hawaii, when it's really commonplace to be a multicultural in the sense that you have a lot of family backgrounds, is there a way to bridge that gap and have a way to, it's not necessarily be just grouped as Asian, but just kind of just getting the community together and figuring out a way to be heard in that sense.
Great.
Thanks.
Thank you. So let's open up to our panel to answer those three questions.
I can talk
Yeah.
about the
Sure.
non-citizen. The federal government does hire people who are not citizens in special circumstances. There is an Office of Personnel Management, OPM.gov, directive about, or policy memorandum about hiring those who are non-citizens. There are special circumstances, especially in special positions of security or requiring certain skills like interpretation, which is why there are cases in which DOD, National Institutes of Health, and some other agencies will hire non-citizen, but you're directed to call the agency specifically in order to do that. And maybe that's something we should assist in, is maybe getting those offices out there to the community if there are certain positions. But I know a while back, for instance, DOD was out there recruiting Vietnamese fluent speakers because they needed interpreters badly, and they were willing to take non-citizens. So I think it comes in cycles, and it's kind of a word of mouth thing because the security clearance required for those type of positions are extremely high. So that's why they're not publicized.
And to chime in about internship opportunities for non-citizens, and especially, we have heard this issue come up recently with Pacific Islander students who might not be citizens. It is something that our office is aware of acutely, and we are investigating it right now and trying to see if we can change that policy or get some guidance and try to get non-citizens to at least come intern at our agencies. So keep an eye out for that.
I mean, a lot of these limitations are federal law, and there's nothing the executive branch can do about that. So, I mean, one thing is to think about, maybe there needs to be legislative change, and that's something you guys maybe need to work on.
And answer the multiculturalism question, I think, it is tough. My background is English, German, and Thai/Chinese American. And I think, one of the places for me at my school, there was a HAPA club, there was a HAPA Issues Forum that gave that venue to discuss that part of the identity and how you actually become in one person sort of a bridge between different places. So if I go into a room like this one that's predominantly Asian American, I feel more white. And if I go into a room that's predominantly Caucasian, I feel more Asian. And to understand, sort of looking within that to how do you then translate that part of the other community and the other half of yourself to each community, I think becomes sort of a personal challenge. But I think also looking for their venues. There are, I know MIT has a HAPA club. I know there are a number of different places that have them. And then also just, I don't know, looking, I think to some degree, one of the reasons I joined the initiative was because I didn't have to self-select into one category or another. And I think that, in some ways, those Pan-Asian groups can be helpful in that respect.
Sure.
And just a quick note about how do we incorporate feminism in our work. Our director, Kiran Ahuja, is a fierce NAPOF leader, the National APA Women's Forum. And that's, yeah, I see some NAPOFers back there, Olivia. And so we try to incorporate the women and girls issues in all of our work. We partner with the White House Council on Women and Girls on a number of different projects, and including a report on AAPI women's issues. Our former colleague Amanda did roundtables across the country assessing issues that API women and girls are dealing with every day, and we're submitting a report to the White House in the next couple months. So that's our work on API women.
Well, let's give our initiative staff a round of applause. Great, and I'm going to dismiss them back to their seats as we close.
Can I leave everyone with two words of, I always give this to every group I speak to, especially young people. Two sort of catchphrases I always keep in mind, all right? Number one is the best ideas are stolen ideas, right? Don't reinvent the wheel. You have a room here full of resources. If somebody else has a great program that works, copy it. Copy it. Half of my stuff that I've developed or that I have in my hard drive is stuff I've stolen from other conferences and groups I've gone to, right? Second thing is my political mentor, Glenn Maxey, who was the first openly gay state representative in the state of Texas, always has this saying about challenging yourself to rise to the occasion when you identify a need. If you ever find yourself saying, someone really oughta, that someone is you. Right? If you ever find yourself saying, someone really oughta, that someone is you.
Wow. Thank you. Rami always has a way of making me speechless at the end of his talks. I don't really know how to, it's breathless. With that, we are going to move into our last part of this program, which is our closing remarks. And when we were thinking about how to set up our program, the person that came to mind the most was this next gentleman who I'm going to invite up here. He is someone that I have absolute respect for, someone that epitomizes the word passion, someone who's been a tireless fighter for the community, the young Americans across this country. It's his portfolio. I'm a coworker of his in the Office of Public Engagement. It's his portfolio to reach out to young Americans across this country, and he has been kind of leading the way in making and filling some big feat in terms of really setting the standard high as to how we engage our communities and really make sure that this administration's policies are moving forward. And so with that, I have the honor of welcoming up Mr. Ronnie Cho.
Well, thanks, Eddie. That's awfully nice of you to say. Hello, everyone. My name is Ronnie Cho, and I am an Associate Director at the Office of Public Engagement, along with my colleague, Eddie Lee. Rami, good to see you. It's been a long time, since Austin, Texas. So I want to talk a little bit about what we do at the Office of Public Engagement. I think you spent most of the day learning about the federal government and kind of what we work on here as it relates to the 300+ million Americans, but specifically the AAPI community. But to describe a little bit about what we do at the Office of Public Engagement, this office was initially the Office of Public Liaison. It was rebranded when President Obama when he came into office in 2009. Generally, this office was a place where the White House senior administration officials could interact with the business community, VIPs, elected officials, sort of fancy people like that. That has been the case for the last few decades until when President Obama came in the office, said, we ought to extend that same opportunity to ordinary Americans, communities all across this country, different stakeholders from all over. I think it's important to illustrate that these kind of forums were not happening 5 years ago, were not happening 12 years ago, and it's an important distinction to be made that this is a president that understands the value and the need for an accessible and responsive government, a place where you can say, you guys are doing a great job, or you guys are really blowing it. That's an important discussion and conversation to have. The president has had a special relationship with young people for his entire career, since he was a community organizer in the south side of Chicago, to when he was a law professor at the University of Chicago. Certainly his political career has been influenced and shaped and propelled by the power of young people. And I think the designation that I have as his liaison illustrates his commitment continuing to advocate on behalf of young people, whether that's from student loan debt to health care for 2.5 million Americans, young Americans that were previously uninsured. There's tremendous accomplishments here that we should be proud of. The other thing that I want to mention that maybe you folks don't talk about is that the AAPI community is very close to the president himself personally. We know his background. We know that his cultural influences come from the AAPI experience. And I think that's a special relationship that he has with our community, and that sort of has informed a lot of the initiatives that we have here that are truly historic in nature and the level of robust interaction that we have. And it's an important thing to understand that you have a fighter in the White House who's addressing these issues. And if not completely solving them and mitigating them, addressing them, bringing people who know these issues better than us. Now, there are a lot of smart people at the White House, some of the smartest people you'll ever meet anywhere. But we don't have all the answers. We can't do all of the work. And I think very humbly, we come to the American people and say, we need your help. We need your assistance. We need your communication. We need your network. So when someone asked about the accountability piece of it, right? What are you guys going to do when this thing ends? I think that's a good question. It's an important question to ask. But the question, I think, is applicable to everybody here and everyone paying attention online. What are we going to do? What accountability do we have to our own communities, to our own families, our own neighborhoods and towns and cities? Now, the journey that brought you to this room, obviously a lot of impressive young leaders in this space, but you don't get to come to the White House because simply you're that great and you're that brilliant or attractive. There's a lot of good-looking Asian people in this room. You get here because there was a community that supported you, a community that gave you values of education, work ethic, the things that have informed and gave me an opportunity in this country. I'm sure I'm not alone when I say that I'm a first-generation Asian American, and that you come to this country with really nothing, not a fancy last name that anyone can even pronounce correctly. Certainly the only Asian family in Phoenix, Arizona, as you can probably imagine. But the things that got me to where I am was a community of other families, people who shared a value of hard work, education, opportunity, that our parents would never have an opportunity to come to the White House and interact with people who can make policy and shape and change people's lives the way that you guys have. So while this is a tremendous honor for all of us to have you here, I'm sure a piece of pride that your family hold that you got a chance to come to the White House. I think it's an obligation for us here, for the folks out in the audience and at home or watching, to do something with this opportunity, that you were in front of people who are making the difference. You are one of those people who are making a difference. And what are we going to do to make things a little bit easier for our own kids, our own families, our own communities, that perhaps was not the case when we came up, maybe was not the case when our parents and our grandparents were around. That is the responsibility, that is a charge that we all have, not only from this presidency to the next presidency and beyond. I think there's an opportunity for the AAPI community to really emerge and assert itself as a community that cares about politics, that cares about the process, that cares about being engaged, holding people accountable. And that is something that I think we're just now kind of taking grasp of, and it's an important thing for us to continue. So I wanted to keep my remarks real short because I really wanted to get a chance to answer any questions. I know being the last speaker of the day is tough in that regard, but if you have any thoughts or questions about how we're engaging folks on college campuses, I work a lot with college students, but young professionals, high school students, all these things, I think it's important for us to keep staying involved. In 2008, I think our generation kind of came to age politically. Now, not talking about politics explicitly, but young people came out in a way that shaped the end result of the election in 2008 rather. And I think there's a sense of literally and figuratively checking the box on election day. And maybe some of us thought, well, that was all we had to do. We had to vote, and that's the extent of my responsibility as a citizen of this country. Well, I think there's an opportunity and a challenge, an obligation to change that attitude. That citizenship, the things that our family came to this country for, was not only economic opportunity, but social justice, fairness, and education. All these things that we value in this country, we need to take some ownership of that. And are we going to be a part of that discussion? We have an opportunity as young people to really mold that in our own vision. It's a tough time for a lot of Americans out there with student loan debt, unemployment, unacceptably high levels. But those are it's a diagnosis of our state as a generation. It's not a terminal, it's not a death sentence for us. We can shape the destiny that we have ahead of us. Just what is that destiny going to look like? And I think with the faces we have here and the people I heard speak earlier, I wouldn't count us out, not one bit. Any questions? I'd love to answer some. Anyone from Arizona by chance? You're from Arizona? Yeah. Where? Scottsdale. Scottsdale, boy. No. Nice. She said it in a knowing way. She and I know what that really means, the way she said it. Any other thoughts? Yes?
Hi. I'm Belle. I go to Columbia.
Columbia,
I was wondering, what is the Office of Public Engagement doing to encourage AAPI voters to vote in the next election? And also, is the Office of Public Engagement doing anything about the upcoming elections in terms of voter ID, photo ID fraud?
So those are great questions. I want to be clear, and I think this is a hard thing for a lot of people to discern. I think the lines can be blurred, at least on the perception side. We don't do anything in terms of getting people out to vote, to campaign for anybody. That's just not our job. It's actually illegal, and to be perfectly clear. But what I will talk about is, what this White House, what this president is doing to engage AAPI community at large. I think you spent most of the day with Eddie Lee. That's his job. His whole life, of what is left of one at the hours that he spent, is dedicated to this very thing. My whole life, such as it were, dedicated to making sure that young people understand that there's an opportunity for engagement here. The issues that you have brought up, everyone in this room have brought up, it is live streamed, it is on the record, we have let the sunshine in, people can listen and see what we talked about. And if there is policy that runs contrast to what the general consensus or what is reflective of what this community cares about, we can be held accountable very easily in a way that is historic, really. And that's the other thing that I want to mention. We don't market democracy particularly well, right? So, for instance, the Harry Potter movie comes out, you know exactly when, where to go, how much it's going to cost, what time you got to show up, all that stuff, months and months in advance, maybe even a year in advance. But when there's a zoning hearing, for instance, if there's a liquor store or a strip club that's going to open up in your neighborhood, where the heck do you find that information out? Why isn't, I mean, those are things that impact our lives, at least not to put a value, good or bad, but those are things that impact our life in a way that maybe we as citizens of this neighborhood ought to know about, right? So those are sort of, that's a small example of why we need to create opportunities where people can understand the impact a zoning law could have on someone, a healthcare law can have on people. That's our job, to make sure that you have an opportunity to understand what you can do, how you can be a part of it. And over the last 2.5 years, I think we've done about as good a job as you possibly can, but we're not getting it all right. Again, we don't have all the answers. So if you have a suggestion of how we can better and most effectively talk to the people in your community, folks out in the audience, the places that you guys hang out and care about, you have his email address. I'll give you mine. Be happy to chat with you about ways that we can collaborate. I'd be delighted to.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir. You can just shout it out. Just come on,
Having learned today's briefings and the interaction with this all AAPI community, I've learned a lot in depth and with what spread of this AAPI program is. And well, we have now kind of our mission to spread the word of mouth and to our community. But at the same time, I feel this briefing and this kind of event is very important. So if you are planning any upcoming, it's not a good idea to just finish one-time event. So if you have any upcoming next event, do you plan some sort of this kind of briefing at other cities or in DC?
That's a good question. We do plan on having a series of different regional conferences out of the Office of Public Engagement. Myself, in the work that I do with young people, also plan on doing a similar kind of convening that we can sort of talk about these issues and really kind of get out of DC. I know many of you probably don't live here, but it is what it is in this town. It can be stifling creatively, intellectually, to be honest. We want to get out of DC and get out to the communities. And so I will ask you to stay tuned for those announcements. I'll share my information. And if you want to sign up for a newsletter, if I can do a shameless plug here, of what things that I work on behalf of young people, which approximately 75 million Americans are under the age of 35. 35. I was never good at math. Stereotypes be damned, I was not good at math. It's whitehouse.gov/Young Americans, and you can find out everything that I'm doing on behalf of our generation here. Other questions? Going once. Yes, yes, sir. And what was your name again? Tommy, good to meet you. Yes. Vincent.
And short question, it seems like you are calling us to collaborate with API here. And I'm from Columbia Vietnamese Student Association, so we have website, and I know other Asian club and organization also have website. If we want to publish this, do you give any kind of consultants or resources for us to put on the website so that others, members in our network, which can get the resources? That's the main thing, get the resources to people who's intended for.
Yes, I think that's an outstanding idea. In fact, you know, we all run a blog. We have our own little websites, Young Americans, or whitehouse.gov/Young Americans. The AAPI has its own website. I would connect with them about specific issues that you have. Maybe there's an opportunity for you to author a blog that identifies an issue that you think needs to be elevated. I think that those are relatively easy things for us to do. I think beyond that, certainly we want to be in touch with you about specific issues. But again, you can't wait for us necessarily to reach out to you. There are, again, 300 million Americans in this country, and we're only getting to a tiny sliver of them. So be proactive. Get a hold of us, and until we answer, and typically I think we're pretty good about that. We want to work on those things. Last question. Someone raised their hand. No? Oh, yes.
Hi, my name is Olivia Chow with the Asian American Justice Center. So
Hi,
I'm
Olivia.
not in college anymore, I'm sorry.
Neither am I, so we're going to get comfortable.
I just wanted to thank you all and everyone that helped put this event together. You're doing a lot of amazing work engaging communities on the ground and bringing them into the White House in D.C. My question is more, how can we get college-age high school youth integrated into some of the issue briefings and the other events that we host, right? How to do some intergenerational conversations and having more of the college students that are here that are able to then speak on the panels and be featured.
That's a great idea. I think those opportunities will present themselves both this spring as we do these regional conferences and as they are relevant locally. I think, as we have these conferences across the country, for me anyway, and I would love, Olivia, I love to exchange contact information. If you and your network has, a desire to be a part of this in a programmatic sense and to be on a panel that we host, I would love to explore a way for that to happen. I think it's an important thing to do. So just want to close, want to say thank you very much. I know it's been a long day for everyone. I hope that you had a good time here. I do want to say that it's, for us, and for me, to be perfectly honest, if I were able to come to an event like this, and as a college student or a high school student, and see people who look a little bit like me, who maybe had the same experience that I did, how much that would have meant to me, and how much that does mean to me now, where I can say that's true, in this White House and across this government, across this administration, that we are truly becoming more representative of the country, population-wise, and virtually every demographic. And I think that's an important measure of progress we should all take a great deal of pride in. And so with that, I want to say thank you so much for being here. We believe in you. The President's proud of you. I certainly am. And I hope to see you guys again real soon.
All right. How you guys feeling? Good? You guys have made it through the whole day here at the White House. And I can't tell you how tremendously proud I am of all of you, how amazed by all of you, and how inspired I am just kind of listening to your stories, seeing your energy, feeling that community vibe here in this room. If I could just get your attention for about 6 or 7 more minutes, and then we'll wrap up from there. You guys are getting handouts, and this handouts was made specifically for you all as you go back to your campuses, your communities, your neighborhoods, and you think about how you want to talk about this experience. And I've basically laid out, I don't know, 7 or 8 different brainstorming ideas. This isn't limited to just these, you could do more, but the opportunities I want to lay out for you all as you think about this is on this page, and I'll just go over them real quick. One is if you want to hold a conference call with your fellow students and you want to invite myself or someone from the White House that you've heard today to the call. My challenge is if you're able to bring 50 people to that call, we'll jump on that call and we'll be on it for however long you want us to talk for. All right, so 50 people across your campus, your neighborhoods, whatever it might be, let me know and we'll set that up. Convene a roundtable on your campus to discuss the issues and the topics that are important to you, right? Just like we did this afternoon. If you want to bring that to your campuses, make it happen. Stay engaged with the White House through social media, and you'll see some websites on there that will allow you to do so. Hold targeted on-site meetings here at the White House. So I know, it's a huge privilege to come here, and if we want to open up these doors to as many folks as possible. If you're able to bring 50 students, 50 advocates to the table, bring them all here for a day, for an hour or two, I'll set up a meeting with you all, with key officials, and we could talk about these issues in more depth. Apply for a White House or a White House initiative on AAPI internship. The deadline for the initiative internship is March 19th. Sign up at whitehouse.gov/AAPI. The White House internship, I believe the deadline is January 19th or 20th, so it's coming 22nd. So please get on the ball on that. So it's less than 10 days away. So if you want to start thinking about how you can get more plugged in with what we're doing over here, it's a tremendous, tremendous opportunity. I think the folks that made this event possible are interns, including Ernie over here, who's pretty much pulling everything together last night at 2 o'clock in the morning, just to make this all possible for you. But to be a part of this experience, even though it's unpaid, even though a lot of your work goes unrecognized, I can guarantee you that you will come away from this experience so inspired and so plugged in that you will never forget it. Organize an event on your campus. That's self-explanatory. Sign up for a White House AAPI email listserv. All of you that are here today will be signed up automatically, so you can't get out of that one. But if you're able to get your friends and your networks engaged as well, you could do so at whitehouse.gov/AAPI. Write an op-ed in your school newspaper. This is often overlooked, especially in our generation, but it goes a long ways, and so I think it can really have an impact. Talk about your experience coming to the White House. Talk about the issues that are important to you and why it matters. Write a blog post. We'll try our best to submit it and post it on our blog, but there's plenty of blogs out there where you can submit your own stories too, and I'm sure people will want to hear it. And the final thing I want to say is share your story. As I said earlier, change happens and real difference happens here in the Beltway. But it doesn't stop here. It also happens in your cafeterias. It happens as you walk to class with your classmate. It happens in your classrooms. It happens, as you're, doing these roundtables. Whatever it might be, share your story. Talk to folks about what you experienced here. Talk to your friends about your immigration story. Talk to your friends about your education story or, civil rights. Whatever it might be. The more you're able to be a voice and an advocate, the better off our community will be as a whole. And so with that, let me just close by saying that, this has been, as I said earlier, probably the event that I have been most proud of. As I thought, the first day I came here and walked through these hallways, I said to myself, I wanted to put together an event that will bring together young people across this country and bring them into a room where we could talk about ideas, where we could construct solutions for the problems that we face on a day-to-day basis. I want to think about how we can work with other communities to move forward as a country. Because this is our moment and our opportunity to really make an impact on our communities. It's very easy for us to be selfish, to live our own lives, kind of stay within the lines, and do what we normally do without thinking about the people around us. But the fact that you guys are all out here today really says a lot, and it says that you want to really be a vocal champion. I see myself, as I said earlier, in your seats not too long ago. And because of that decision to actually take action and step up and stand up, I'm able to be here, and I'm so honored to be your liaison here in the White House for the AAPI community. And I can guarantee you that I will work hard every single day to make you proud of that. So please take this with you. Please use me as a resource. You could feel free to say that you talked to the White House today because you did. You spoke with this administration, and you have that authority to go back to your campuses and make that fire and make that magic happen on your own campuses. The last thing I want to say is that we have put together these executive orders for all of you. signed by the presidents. I know we couldn't get the president out here, but hopefully this will appease that to some extent. We've got one for every single one of you. So on your way out, feel free to take one, frame it, put it up on your wall, and hopefully use this as a way to commemorate your experience here. And so with that, thank you all so much for coming to the first ever White House AAPI briefing for young Americans.